Okay, so for today's panel, business risks, fraud, cybersecurity, and internet reputation management, from bad to worse. We have three panelists. Covering fraud is Adam Hennanen, is an audit manager at Olson Thielen. Cybersecurity is going to be covered by Micah Thor, COO at Tech Guru. And internet reputation management is Blake Nelson, one of the senior attorneys at Helmuth & Johnson. And to kick it off, why don't we all spend a minute or two kind of talking about our bios, your firms, and how you fit into today's discussion. Sure. Why don't we start with Adam?
Okay. All right, this is on. I guess I do got to bring it close. It was intimidating having a microphone right in front of my face, but I'll talk to it anyway. So I am Adam Hennanen with Olson Thielen. A little bit about our firm. We were founded in 1921, so this is our 95th year anniversary. So you know, we're not new pups to the game. We've been around for a long time, and while I might be a young pup, I'm actually honored to be able to work with some of the older dogs in our firm, which there's one of them actually here present. He walks really slow, but he's able to keep up when he needs to. I had to get the first jab out because I'm pretty sure he's going to be sending one my way earlier. So, but our firm is full service accounting firm, and so full service. Well, probably 10, maybe 15 years ago meant audit, tax, and consulting, and now it's evolved into a lot more. We do estate and trust work. We do fraud and forensic investigations, business valuations, 401k and profit sharing plan audits and consulting. So it's evolved into a lot more, and basically, if you can think it, we cover it. And we got a lot of great consultants that work with us that'll help you in many different ways. So.
And I've done a number of things with Adam in the past, so Adam will be able to take care of you, even being a young pup. Anyway, speaking of young pups, Micah, tell us a little bit about you and your firm.
Well, I'm 10 years old, and no, actually, Tech Guru is 11. I'm 10. I am currently now the president of Tech Guru. We changed my title just recently, and my wife informed me that makes her the first lady of Tech Guru, with all the rights and responsibilities that come with that. So Tech Guru is a outsourced IT company, and we like to think of ourselves as a IT department. And your IT department has everything from a CIO down to the guy who barely combs his hair every morning and fixes your computer each day. We provide a strategic resource to our clients to help them develop a cybersecurity plan, a disaster recovery plan, IT budget, and so on and so forth. So this is actually my second cybersecurity panel this week. I did another one in St. Louis Park on Tuesday. So it's definitely a topic that is front of mind for a lot of businesses. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of our experiences with you.
And Tech Guru talks about being the technology company that cares, and I know that firsthand because I've been working with them for a couple of years, and when I call Dan Moshe, who's the founder, on late at night, he definitely helps me out, and so they do go the extra mile, so I appreciate that very much. Thanks, Micah. And then covering internet reputation management is Blake Nelson. Blake.
Thanks, Rick. Blake Nelson. I'm a partner with Helmuth & Johnson. We're in Edina. You may have seen our building on 494 and 169. The common misconception is that is 5 floors of office, so that's 3 floors of parking and 2 floors of office, so that you don't have to ask me about that later. Our firm is a full-service firm. It has a lot of different areas, so rather than say, what we do, I can just tell you that we can pretty much handle what you need as a law firm. My particular area of expertise is real estate law, construction law, and business corporate matters for a lot of people in those industries. I can handle business matters for anybody, but a lot of my clients are in those industries, and that's one of the reasons that I was asked to be on the panel today, because you might not have heard this, but the construction industry is sort of cutthroat. And so internet reputation gets to be sort of a big deal in construction. So that I sort of, over the last 20 years of practice, became somewhat of a expert on what you can and can't do in connection with those, because I have clients that routinely call me and say, what can I do about this thing that's online about me? So that's how I wouldn't call myself an internet reputation management consultant, but I feel like one sometimes, because I have clients that routinely call me and ask about it. So that's how I fit into the puzzle today at the panel. Thanks.
And then Blake and I and Helmuth & Johnson have done a number of things together over the last couple of years, and Blake and I have talked about what he's speaking on today. So Blake was kind of the anchor for the panel and tied all this together. So thank you, Blake. So now that we know a little bit about who our panelists are and their background, why don't we spend 5 minutes or so talking about their various areas of expertise. And again, why don't we start with Adam and tell us a little bit about fraud. And Adam spoke at an event at my Club Entrepreneur over in St. Paul, and the part on fraud I found was very fascinating and fit right into some of the things that Buddy Ruvelson told me. So I invited Adam to be a part of this panel and again, dive into fraud. Tell us a little bit more.
Sure. Well, Rick, since you were there, I usually like to start off because everybody thinks they know what fraud is, and certainly we all hear the stories. Starkey just fired their C-suite executives, and I'm sure there's a fraud story to come out of that later by the FBI. But you read the headlines, and it seems like every other day there's a story of so-and-so just got swindled out of $1 million. Clearly, the $1 million losses are fraud. But fraud, it goes a lot deeper than that, and it can go as small as a few dollars or even just using a company asset. So I like to start with just a story of make sure everybody's on the same page and know what fraud is. And Rick, you participated in this, so you can't give away the answer, right? So everybody just kind of hang with me here. I'm going to paint a picture. So I travel as part of my job, and sometimes that means I fly out late. Sometimes I get there early. But let's just say you're taking that midnight flight, and you get to your hotel, and there's no restaurant open. But you're super starving because the airline food was crap and you didn't get it. So now you're wondering what to do, what to eat. So you open the mini bar, there's a pack of Oreos in there, and it's like $6 or $7 for a pack of Oreos. And you think, this is outrageous, there's like 2 cookies in there. I'm not gonna pay $7 for a pack of Oreos, but it's the only food in the room. You're really hungry, so you take the Oreos, you eat the Oreos. The next day you're walking to, I don't know, the client you're going to, and you stop at the 7-Eleven store, and you see that same pack of Oreos for like 59 cents or $1.50, whatever it is, significantly less than what you paid for, right? So you think, hey, I'll just pick up that pack of Oreos, go back to the hotel, and I'll swap it out with the mini bar, and they'll never know that I ate it. I don't have to pay the $7 mini bar charge I got by and for $1.50. So just by a quick raise of hands, who thinks that that's fraud? Wow, you guys, either your hands aren't going up high enough or everybody here thinks that it's cool. So that's good. What if that pack of Oreos that you ate expired tomorrow and you replaced it one that doesn't expire for 6 months? Is that still fraud? What are you taking from this hotel? You're taking convenience, right? I mean, you're taking their profit, but you're taking convenience. They're selling convenience. They put that pack of Oreos in your minibar fridge because they know that people come in on the late night flight, are super hungry and want to eat a pack of Oreos. So they charge you $7 because they know you're going to pay $7 to eat it. So you're taking away their convenience. You're stealing from them. So that is fraud, but it's not very big. So I don't think the Hilton's going to sue me because I took their 6-pack of Oreos or their $6 pack of Oreos and didn't replace it. But bottom line is that fraud can be, $1 million. It can be $6. It can just be the use of a company asset. The ACFE is the organization that I work with that certifies me as a fraud investigator. And they publish out some really good information on fraud, and I encourage you to go out to their website. But there's plenty of statistics out there. They say that businesses lose about 5% of revenues to fraud each year. And the average median loss is somewhere around $130,000, which I don't know about most of you, but I would love to have $130,000 back in my pocket if I were running a business. And to kind of put it on the mark how close that number really is, I actually had a client 2 years ago that said, yeah, we had a sales guy that stole from us. I said, really, what happened? He said, well, he was booking fake jobs. So he was a salesman also. And he would book fake jobs and book hotel rooms, and then he would turn them in for reimbursement, but not really go on the trips. And he said he actually kept really detailed records. He had a notebook next to his computer that tracked every single job that he stole, and it amounted to like $130,000. I'm like, no way, get out of here. That's what they said that, the statistic is. And I said, well, why didn't you call me? I do these. He says, well, we had him insured. So they actually paid the $1,000 deductible and were able to recollect on the bonded insurance that they had over the person. But not everybody does that for their employees. And so you're all susceptible to fraud if you run a business. The question is, how much attention are you paying to your business? And a lot of these stories you read, it's the accountant. You have one accountant that does everything for you. She writes the checks, she mails the checks, she handles your invoices, does the accounting, or he. I shouldn't say she. I'm not trying to throw genders under the bus. But the point is that businesses put a lot of reliance on one person in their company, and if you have one person handling all of that, you have to have some oversight over that person, which means that even though you're a business owner and you like to sell, you have to pay attention to the finances, or you have to have somebody help you pay attention to the finances. And so there's a lot of prevention that you can do. And prevention goes a long way. Pay attention to the red flags, employees with gambling habits, stuff like that, where maybe they're driving a really expensive car into your place when you only pay them $30,000. And it might be perfectly fine that they have a spouse that makes, hundreds of thousands of dollars each year and they can afford that nice car. But if their spouse is a nonprofit worker who doesn't make that kind of money, but they're still driving that nice car, that money's coming from somewhere. So, and it might be your pocketbook. So you got to pay attention to that. And when I speak about prevention, there's a lot of things you can do. And the example I use is, if you want a crook to stop breaking into your house, you don't necessarily need the security system. You just need the sign that your neighbor posts out in their yard to put in your yard, and then that should be enough to deter them away. So prevention is just building awareness that you might get caught if you try to steal the money. So, yeah, there's nothing fraudulent about stealing your neighbor's sign, but I'm not saying you should do that. But and we actually have we got a security system this year, and I actually laughed when I planted that sign in my my rock bed. I'm thinking, I should somehow chain this down so nobody else takes it and puts it in their yard. But how are we doing on time? Do I gotta let it go? I might be over, but there's plenty of stories, and fraud is really interesting, and I would love to sit down with you and talk about stories. I could tell war stories all day long, and they're really fun to hear, and everybody's got great stories. So usually when I'm done talking, someone comes up and says, yeah, I had a bookkeeper that stole some money from me. So everybody's got a story or knows something. So.
And we will go into some Q&A time for everybody when you have some questions. I was going to give everybody kind of a chance to just do a little bit of a brain dump here.
Yep.
So thanks, Adam. Micah, how about you?
Yeah, I've got a couple of stories, and I'm gonna make up a fictitious person that's sitting in this chair right here. Their name is Jim, and Jim is the CEO of Acme Widget Works. So, in this story, I am living in Russia. And I really don't like the U.S. And Jim's just somebody I happened to come across when I was surfing the web for a company to steal some money from. So I go onto Jim's website, and I find out that Jim's the CEO of this company. So I find out what his email address is, and I create a fictitious email address so that I can email somebody as Jim. So I also find out that Jim's controller is named Mike. So I send an email to Mike. I also know now that they make widgets, so I'm going to reference something related to widgets. So I send Mike an email. I say, hey, Mike, it's Jim. I just bought some new manufacturing equipment to make our widgets even faster from Korea. I need you to wire this money to this account number ASAP. Thanks. What do you think the chances are that Mike is going to question that email if it's coming from the CEO with the CEO's email address and the signature and everything completely authentic? Happens all the time. It almost happened to us last week. Somebody went on our website, figured out who the key people were, and sent an email asking our controller to wire some money to a foreign account. And when our controller didn't do that, I almost kissed him on the lips. Because I saw it and I was like, wow, I might have made the wrong decision on this. And we had a client who will remain anonymous who had something similar to this happen to them. Their email account got hacked into. The person that hacked it impersonated the owner of the company and emailed their small banker. They were able to find through the sent items who the banker was just by doing some keyword searching. And they started a dialogue with them and said, we need to transfer this money right now to this foreign account number. And there was some back and forth about, we really need you to come in and sign it. And they had this excuse about how I'm on the other side of the planet right now, and this is a short, window of opportunity. They convinced the small banker to wire $15,000 to another account. And they didn't find out about this until they couldn't make payroll the next day. Oh boy. And there was a scramble at the bank to figure out what happened. And there's a small banker right now that's probably looking for a job because they made a mistake. And a mistake that any one of us here could make, because these guys are really, really clever, and they're getting better and better each day. Second story, true story. You come into work tomorrow and you can't open up some files. Seems strange, you try a couple others and the other ones work fine, so you just keep working, right? Hour or two later, you go back to those files you couldn't open in the morning, and you still can't open them. So now you pick up the phone and you call the IT guy, and you're like, hey, I can't open the fax cover template sheet. Can you take a look at it? IT guy remotes in your computer, and he says, oh, you've got a crypto locker. Anybody here know what crypto locker is? Okay, I see some people nodding and smiling because I'm guessing they may have been crypto lockered at one point. So crypto locker is this new ransomware. You may have read about it in the paper recently. There was a hospital in California that got ransomed for the tune of $3-some million. What happened was somebody clicked on a link and it installed some virus on their computer. It was an innocent link, like a travel website or something like that they normally go to. But that travel website had been compromised, and it was pushing out malware onto these computers, or viruses. So the virus starts running, and it looks for shared drives on a server, and it starts encrypting the files so that nobody can open them. And then it drops a little ransom note on the desktop of their computer and says, hey, pay us $3 million if you're at this hospital, and we'll give you the key to unlock these files. Well, the hospital didn't have a good backup, and so they had to pay the ransom. Now, they were able to negotiate it down to $15,000, which goes to show the, the capabilities of these hackers when it comes to negotiations. But $15,000 is a drop in the bucket when you think about how many days it took them to get their files back. So it was probably well over, 6 figures or maybe even 7 figures in the losses that they took, and people that couldn't work and still had to pay wages, and patients they had to turn away, and things like that. So think about it this way, the hospital burned down. And that's really what we're seeing these crypto locker viruses as, a existence level event. If they hadn't have had a backup, or if these hackers didn't give them that key back, right? They paid the $15,000 and they're like, just kidding, we're never giving you the files back. They wouldn't be in business. It's like something nuked their hospital, same equivalent of that. So, sorry to ruin your lunch and tell a couple of horror stories, but it's serious stuff, and a lot of times people don't get to hear the real stories about this. You hear a high-level, headline article about it, but it doesn't become real until you hear a story about it happening to actual people.
Great, thanks. And for more good news, Blake?
So I'll make up another pretend person. This pretend person, maybe it's the same Russian. I don't know. But let's just say that it's not. Let's say it's actually someone who's in Minnesota that is a competitor of one of my clients and decides to set up a fake Gmail address and a fake name and decides to go online and write a really scathing review about the company, whatever they did. And in my line of work, let's say it's a construction company, and this review says things like, well, first of all, when the foreman showed up, he was clearly drunk. I had to escort him off the property to the extent he could walk, and the list goes on about how terrible it was, and the workmanship was horrible, and they tried to double charge me and all of this. And so then the client calls me and says, I just saw this review. This is nonsense. This isn't even a client. What do I do about this? How do I get this off of there? And so you tell me, what would you do? It's a fake name with a fake email, and it's going through, let's say, Yelp. Well, you could sue Google and Yelp trying to get a subpoena for the IP address of whoever created that thing that's out there, because in my case, it's clearly not even a real person. The short answer is, unfortunately, practically speaking, as a business, there's not really anything you can do other than try to maybe push that result down in the internet searches by flooding the internet with some positivity, I suppose. Like an internet reputation management company might come in and tell you, okay, well, we're going to send out 100 press releases about how awesome you are, and we're going to get like 15 million links on your website for all your articles, and we're just going to try to push that bogus review off onto page 3 of Google in hopes that no one finds it. Nobody goes past page 1, we hope, but nevertheless, it's there. So second story, because those types of things happen all the time, and sometimes it's a real customer, sometimes it's not. Many times I have found it's a competitor that realizes they can just pose as whoever they want, they can bash you wherever they want, and you really can't touch them or even figure out who the heck it is, because it's all on the internet and it's completely anonymous in many respects. So sometimes, it might be a real customer that posts that, and there are, that if you can actually tangibly figure out who it is, then you're way ahead of the game, because at least you know who's doing it, and then there might be other steps that you could take. But one of the steps that sometimes people use to their advantage is, okay, well, the longer this thing is out there, the more likely it's going to fade off into the sunset. Fresher content comes onto the internet, and maybe, as time goes on, this bogus thing that clearly some fake imposter besmirched my company with is going to fade off by itself, hopefully. So I had another story where I had a client who, you remember there was a newspaper. First of all, I want to make sure nobody's here that used to work there or something. But so there's a newspaper called The Pulse. Anybody work for The Pulse or know The Pulse? Okay, good. So there was a newspaper called The Pulse, and it was a local Minneapolis newspaper, and they had a website, and they had a paper edition, and they published a very provocative article about one of my clients that made it seem like my client was a devious, big, fat cheater. And that, it was implied, it wasn't directly stated like in a slanderous or libelous way where they flat out lied about my client, but the tone of the article and the way that they described my client was that these guys are not honest, and they are bucking the system and skirting the rules, and they're not to be trusted. Understandably, my client was not happy about that. So then the Pulse... So they post this on their website, okay? So it's in the newspaper once, and that's fine. I mean, the newspaper gets thrown away, somebody read it, but now with the internet these days, it's out there, right? But you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, eventually, it's not like the Pulse is super highly ranked, so hopefully this goes away in a short order. Well, the Pulse ended up going out of business. But for some reason, they left the website up. And the website was set to refresh the date every day, so that every single thing on their website seemed like it had just been published that day. So it was like Groundhog Day for my client. Every single day, this horrible article was brand new. And so, what do you do, right? Well, in this case, we know who's doing it, so we sued them. And now we get into the First Amendment and the freedom of speech and the rights of the newspaper and all of those things. And don't ask me, this guy who ran the Pulse went out of business, but still managed to have enough money to hire lawyers to defend vigorously against this lawsuit. Meanwhile, it had the sidebar, worse not intended effect, of drawing more attention to the article, because now I've got John Tevlin from the Star Tribune calling me, asking about it and writing about it in the Star Tribune, and then it's online there to talk about the fact that this Pulse, and so it totally backfired. And at the end of the day, they dismissed the lawsuit after spending a ton of money, and they just left it alone. So you can probably go find it. But that's, so, my news isn't good about what you can do these days with these issues. Now, I deal with it a lot, and there are ways, if you know who the person is, that you can try to back them off, and we can talk about that later. But those are just two war stories that sort of are a little bit scary. It's like, you're basically at the mercy of people, and you really don't have a lot of control.
Great, thank you. All right, so again, I have some questions here. I'll work from those, but if somebody wants to chime in and ask one, please feel free to do. Oh, we got one over there, Eric.
Okay, gentlemen, the iPhone, the big elephant in the room. What do you think of the iPhone situation? FBI, maybe the NSA, I have no idea.
Wow. Feels like a politically loaded question that I could get right or wrong. I totally see Apple's side of it, in that just like all of you who own businesses want to be able to safeguard your product and ensure that your customers are going to maintain the confidentiality of working with you or the integrity of that product. Apple wants the same thing. They want to be able to build a product that you feel confident that nobody's going to be looking at your embarrassing photos, your terrible selfies, your double chin that your wife keeps taking pictures of when you're sleeping.
The first lady.
Yeah, the first lady. She's got way better arms than Michelle, by the way. So I personally, I like the idea of us being able to have some privacy, but at the same time, it's hard to put people's lives at risk as a result of that privacy. So it's a difficult conversation that I think we all have to be paying attention to and contributing to. I don't know that there's a simple answer to the question, because I would feel very differently if somebody that I loved died and I knew that there may be some answers on a phone that was locked, and based on principle, we don't unlock that phone. It's tough. Sorry, I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's my personal feelings on it.
Blake, from a legal perspective.
What he said. Well, you know, it's tough from a legal perspective because, you know, Apple is creating, if anybody knows anything about Apple, they know how hard they protect their IP, and you know, nobody pays much attention to it. But think about every time you do anything with an Apple product and you click through that agreement. Do you actually read that thing? I don't, because it wouldn't change anything. You either want iTunes or you don't. So you click on it and you say, I agreed. You know, I don't need it emailed to me. But you know, they're very protective, and so it's, you know, despite, you know, national security or other security issues and people's lives at stake from a legal standpoint, I mean, you can see where they're coming from, that this is their intellectual property, and you can't, you know, if anybody's going to say you can't steal my IP, it's Apple. Or make me do something with it that I don't want to do with it, or make me use it for something that I don't want to use it for. So, you know, I kind of see it from a legal intellectual property standpoint, that I guess I would be, you know, not from a political standpoint, but from an IP standpoint, I can really see Apple's point of view in a lot of respects. You know, I echo your sentiments about if it happened to me, I might feel differently. But from a legal standpoint, I think they've got some pretty high ground to stand on as far as you can't make me do this. But.
All right, thanks. I'll get to you next over here. I think you were.
My question is for Micah. So I'm a brand new business, and I am watching my Google Analytics, and I see somebody from Russia has been looking at my site, and I'm getting spammed every day by everybody who wants to help me to monetize my website. What do I do? Do I just ignore all the spam? Do I unsubscribe? Do I answer them? Do I just ignore it?
Well, you know, there's I guess a couple of answers to that question. Number one, I'll comment on the unsubscribe piece. Once upon a time, I got 30, maybe 40 emails a day of what I thought was spam or called spam, but it actually was something that I unintentionally subscribed to. You go to a conference, for example, and God help you when you get back, because you got 40 emails in your inbox that you didn't ask for, right? So at the bottom of all those emails, there is an unsubscribe option. So you can go through and get all that stuff to stop. So I did that, and it radically changed my life. I got an hour a day back of my time. Even though it just popped in, it was like, all right, delete, you know, just kind of ignore it. Every time that notification pops up that I got a new email, it's kind of distracted me from the work that I'm doing. So I went on this soapbox campaign in our company about unsubscribing to everything because it's killing your productivity. And I took it to our clients, and I'm hoping that it's actually making a difference. The other trick that I do is I create a conference email address. I just did it because I'm going to South by Southwest Interactive next week. And I just added an S to the end of my name. And I've signed up for a bunch of meetups and free parties and things like that. And as soon as I get home, I am deleting that email address because I want to be the one opting into communication from people, right? So delete the email address. They're never going to be able to spam you after that. Real spam, there's not a whole lot you can do with that other than, you know, take your email address off your website. There's one way you can do that. Take your email off of your domain registrar. So when you bought a domain name, you filled out some technical contact information. A lot of times that's public. You can make that private by calling your domain registrar where you register the domain, and then they won't be able to see that email address. But then also just have a really good spam filter and be vigilant about marking things as spam if they're truly not something that if it's something that doesn't have an unsubscribe button on the bottom and it's unsolicited, hit that spam button in Gmail or Outlook or whatever it is, because that's contributing to the community of spam blocking. So some of you may have been inadvertently put on a spam list because you've been unsolicited, you know, emailing people, and they mark you as spam. And after about 10 people do that, it shares that information with all the spam filtering servers on the planet, and your name gets blacklisted. So that helps too.
And hold on a second, I got to follow up.
Real quick, Micah. Unsubscribe doesn't always work. In some cases, you are just confirming for the person that sent you that email that you have a valid email address. So you have, I would say to the group, make sure you listen to what Micah just said, because you got to do this before you end up getting spam. Make sure you take care of your email addresses. Make sure you're distributing it appropriately. I unsubscribe just like everybody else does, but I'll bet you 2 out of 3 times it works, and the other
guy in Russia.
The guy in Russia. And
All right.
He only needs,
Yeah, hold on.
he only needs to prove to the people he's selling it.
Okay, so I have one over here, and then we'll get to you, Patrick. Okay.
So I have a question about the crypto virus you were talking about. I thought I read somewhere that they're starting to figure out how to block those with antivirus first. And then second of all, is it not possible to open those up by, I mean, I'm assuming that there's enough technology out there to figure out what that lock is.
So I'll start with the not being able to unlock it. This is part of that conversation with the iPhone, and that there's certain cryptology software available that nobody can crack. Supposedly not even the NSA, right? And that's why we're in the situation that we are right now, is that there's technology that is ahead of hackers. Yep, it's readily available, open source and free, and that's what these hackers are building these tools with. So truly nobody can unlock these files. It would have happened to that hospital if they would have unlocked it if they could have, because they had the resources to pay somebody to do that if it was available. And the second piece, it's really nearly impossible to keep up with hackers. For example, antivirus software works like this. You go to a site, you click on something that's bad, and your antivirus looks at it, and it says, okay, we've got a definition for this. It's called cryptowall.x, right? Okay, we know that file name is a virus, quarantine it, and delete it. But what happens if I'm the hacker and I change it now to cryptowall.z? The antivirus looks at it and says, I don't know that that's bad, I'll let it in, right? So it's this big cat and mouse game with the antivirus solutions and the hackers, and they are changing things by the second. There's thousands of virus definition updates per day for every antivirus software. So the best protection is really to have a disaster recovery plan. We talk to our clients about preparing for not if, but when, and treating it like an existence level event. Anybody know ever heard that term, ELE? Anybody? So it's a science term about, Armageddon happening or an asteroid hitting Earth and just destroying life as we know it. It's called an ELE. So we talk about a crypto wall virus coming into your company, like a meteor hitting the Earth and just wiping out your existence. Because if somebody came into your company tomorrow and locked every single file on your server and didn't give you the keys back to get it, and you didn't have a good backup, would you be in business the next day? Now, these are real things that are happening to people. A backup that you can reliably restore every single file within a reasonable amount of time. So having a backup that's 1 day old is great, but how long does it take you to actually return to operation by restoring that backup? If that backup's on a tiny little hard drive in somebody's drawer at home, how long does it take you to get a new server spun up and all those files restored and everybody back and working? Could be weeks. And what if that backup isn't good? And you got to go back further, like a few weeks or a month. For a lot of people, it might as well be totally gone at that point. If you're missing that much data in your accounting software, your ERP, or something critical like that, that's bad news.
Okay, Patrick, we had over here.
This was 10 years ago plus. So this was not yesterday. This was like 2005. So if you were to ask me today, what would a client do to combat something like this? I would tell them that they should try to use an internet reputation management company to flood the internet with positivity, press release, get links to your website, and to try to push it off of the front page onto page 2 or 3 of Google and just try to get it to back into history and not spend time and money on it. This particular client of mine was also extremely hot-headed. And the owner of the Pulse newspaper seemed to be cut of the same cloth, because believe me, we tried to resolve this numerous times without suing them. And it became sort of this standoff game of chicken where eventually my client was like, I'm done. And then he just ordered us to sue this guy. And we warned him. We're like, what are you suing? I mean, this guy's not even in business anymore. I mean, he's like, well, then he won't have the money to defend. Well, it turns out he did somehow. So I agree with you that that's, today that would not be the strategy. That was more of a horror story to tell you than a way to handle it.
So shift towards fraud for a little bit. Adam, when is the right time to engage an expert when you start to see something that you consider maybe suspicious, or you hear kind of rumors at the water cooler or whatever? What's the right time to bring somebody in who knows a little bit more than the average person?
Sure. Well, I mentioned, how fraud can take a different materiality level, millions of dollars. Obviously, if you lost $1 million and you knew your accountant took it, I would encourage you to consult an attorney and a forensic accountant. But if, a lot of companies lose money where the bookkeeper gets caught taking a few $1,000s, and maybe she got caught actually trying to pay it back, which is a lot of times what happens. Sometimes those just result in a quick termination of the employee. The thing about fraud, though, is that a lot of times what you uncover is just the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, most cases, when you're interviewing a fraud suspect and you know that they took the money, you've already identified that they did this, and maybe they've even admitted to it, and you're just trying to identify how much they took. Let's just say we uncovered $400,000. I'm going to say, what did you do with the $600,000? And they'll probably come back and say, well, it wasn't $600,000. It was only $500,000. Well, then I know that I've only found 400. I got another 100 to look for, at least another 100 to look for. So when people steal, they tend to try and undersell how much it was they took. They feel bad already about stealing. Most of them really do. And so they're going to say, I didn't take, it wasn't that much. Or, they're going to try and feel for how much you think they already took. And then they're going to say, yeah, I took. If you said, I caught you stealing this $2,000, yes, I took the $2,000. I was trying to pay it back. But in reality, it's possible they took $50,000 or $100,000, and you just don't know about it. So I guess when it comes down to it is, consultations are generally free from most professionals. So pick up your phone and just call someone and just say, hey, this is what happened to me. What do you think? And we'll start laying out the facts. Or if you're able to do it yourself, just lay out the facts and say, okay, what do I know about this person? Well, if she only had access to your petty cash box at your front desk, and there's only $500 in there and that's what went missing, she probably only lost $500. Terminate the employee and move on. What you shouldn't do, and I had this happen in a case, is catch your CFO stealing money up to $10,000 or more, have them pay it back, and keep them on your payroll only 2 years later to suspect them of stealing again. So, fraud is a serious thing, and it sets the tone to what they think is okay to do. And you don't want the keeper of your funding to be a fraudulent person. So terminate that person when you find out that they're stealing from you on the spot. So.
Adam, if I can add to that, even if you fire that individual, what I found that happens is they go work somewhere else and they pull the same scam, and then they come back and they blame the first company for not letting them know what's going on when they fall through reference. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on. So you just got to terminate them and move on, but make sure that they kind of follow them a little bit so they don't get you in trouble in the future.
Thanks, Mike. Any other last questions from the audience?
I had a comment on the DNR. The ELE is great. The best example of that is probably 9/11.
Yeah, I think the concept of you can't afford not to applies here, right? People say, well, we can't afford that level of IT. Well, you have to, unfortunately.
What's your business worth?
Right.
Seriously. It's really what it comes down to.
Yep.
I'm going to throw a softball to the group. What can you do culturally within your own organization to, if you're the owner of a company, you can't be the only one that knows everything that's going on. What else can you do to have an early warning system in place? Adam, maybe this is about whistleblowing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, like I said, you want to catch fraud or prevent it from happening before. That's your best chance at preventing fraud is setting the tone in your workplace. So let your employees know that we don't stand for fraud and then that you'll be terminated on the spot. But not only that, educate them on the ways. And that sounds kind of funny. And I always thought, 5 years ago before I became a CFE, I couldn't have told you. I audited financially companies, but I couldn't have told you how to steal money. And then I went to some training. I think I could probably list off 40 different ways I could rip a company off right now, which sounds really weird. So it's like, okay, we're just giving this employee keys to our funding, but that's not it at all. It's letting everybody know that, hey, here's what can happen with fraud, and here's what's going to happen if you get caught, and I know about it too, and so I will catch you. And then it's also putting in the other things, the whistleblower policies, and most of the frauds that get reported are reported by other employees. And so having a channel for them to communicate back to somebody within the organization, a hotline, if you will, where they can communicate that anonymously if they feel, is going to greatly improve the chances of a fraud that's going on in your company of getting reported. And you don't want, you want that person that's receiving that call to probably not be a manager type role, because if someone's going to report their boss, I mean, they don't want to have to go and report to their boss that, hey, you're stealing money from our company. So you want it maybe a board member or an owner or your CPA firm or your lawyer, and see if they'd be open to handling that call or that channel for you. So set the tone of prevention and make open channels of communication within your organization about fraud. Those are your best chances.
Thank you. Question over here.
Say you're a small business, well established, you have a dozen employees or a couple dozen. What levels of proactive protection should be best practice within the company relative to all the various devices? Multi-level, sort of access to each device. What sort of things are appropriate?
Sure, great question. And I'll try to avoid a lot of acronyms and tech jargon here, but everybody, the old adage is security is like an onion, you need lots of layers, right? So taking away admin rights from computers is a starting point. Having a best of breed, always up to date antivirus program. Having an IT department that's not only deploying updates for Windows and Java and Flash and Reader, but they're also reporting on which machines are deficient in that area that need an update and being held accountable for those updates. Complete transparency there that all your machines are fully patched is such a huge thing. So when you get a virus on your computer, it's typically exploiting one of those missing security patches in Windows or Java or something like that. So people really kind of don't understand that part of it. They just think it's this annoying pop-up that, well, I don't need to update right now because it's still working, right? Well, the real reason you need to update is because somebody's about to exploit that older version. So it's very, very difficult to keep all of those computers up to the very latest and greatest technology unless you've got a provider that's doing that for 2,000 people day in and day out, and they've got a person dedicated to doing it. So if you don't have somebody within your organization that can manage that, it's such a critical piece to be able to outsource that. Yes?
Small follow-up. What about VPNs?
Yeah.
What was the question?
VPN.
Oh,
What
VPNs?
about VPNs?
Okay, let's hold that. Why don't you guys talk offline
Okay.
because we're almost online. Bob, you had a question?
Just a quick one from a procedure standpoint. About 6 months ago, I had a small side business with an e-commerce website. I found out long after the fact that Boris in Kiev, Ukraine, literally, so figured,
Yeah.
hacked my website through a plugin that was out of date and had launched a phishing attack unbeknownst to me against Navy Federal Credit Union.
Yeah.
Go Boris. And I didn't find out until a so much junk mail.
Yeah.
I saw this and I thought, no, this is junk, and I deleted it. And the second time I looked at it and thought, it looks interesting. And the third time I got it, said, you're out of here, you're blacklisted, which means you're invisible on the internet. And if you're an e-commerce business, you are shut down
Yep.
right now.
Yep.
What steps should one take to mitigate that? And if you do get to the point where you're blacklisted, what steps should one take?
Great question. And I want to talk quick about how the world has evolved in the last 2 years, because 2 years ago, you used to run updates like once a month, right? You do a quarterly IT, refresh, and everything would get updated. That doesn't work anymore. You gotta have daily, hourly updates happening, and you have to have monitoring, and you need something proactive. We can no longer do the break-fix style IT that we used to. We have to be very intentional about pushing out updates, not when it's convenient, but when it's required. So if that sales guy can't give you 5 minutes during the day, you need to take that computer away for 5 minutes to make sure that it's safe. That kind of concept. You need to take down your website once a week for a scan. It may seem inconvenient, but it's essential. But finding a service, there's lots of providers out there. May sound a little self-serving for me to be talking about that, but there are people like me. This is all we do all day long, is we monitor and maintain your stuff.
Okay, so we're at, and actually after a little bit, we have the room as long as we want, 30 seconds. Why don't everybody kind of wrap up with a few nuggets to leave the audience with, and then again, we can all stay as long as we'd like. Adam, you want to start?
Sure. So most of you guys seem interested in cybersecurity, and that's the hot topic, so I understand why. But when your accountant steals from you, please do give me a call and we'll talk about it. But if you want to hear more war stories and or preventative methods, there's a lot of great things you can do that are non-financial, and that's one of the things people are always cost prohibited, right? And what can we do? We don't want to spend the money on doing some internal control assessment. There's a lot of things you can do that don't cost money and are very easy to implement and will significantly reduce the risk of fraud going on in your company. So feel free to reach out. Olsen Thielen publishes articles all the time. Every now and then I get in on that, and I'll publish ideas out there for you to follow. So follow our newsletter. Visit our website. We got a blog that issues a lot of great articles on prevention. Or just pick up the phone and call. I'd love to chat. If I'm not, maybe wait a couple months until I get through this busy audit tax season. But after that, let's hit the golf course, go fishing, do something, and then I'll talk your ear off on fraud prevention. So,
great, thank you, Micah.
I think the gentleman over here nailed it. You can't afford not to. Right, that's the concept that I'd like to leave everybody with, is that if you have any questions about your cybersecurity policy in your business and your confidence level around being able to survive an existence level event, don't waste any more time. Get on the phone with somebody today and start the conversation and do it.
I'll leave you with sort of an old school thought, customer service. We didn't really get into the incidents when you actually have real customers who are mad at you online. We talked about some of these outliers where it's crazy people or, but the most common thing I see is an actual customer who's mad about something. And then, the old adage is if somebody's happy about something, they tell one person, and if they're mad, they tell 10. In this case, the people who are mad are telling 1 million. And so customer service, it goes back to the core principles of do good work, communicate with your customers, and keep them happy at all costs, and you will greatly eliminate. I see a lot of my clients, and when I see that the ones who have the most problems with the people complaining are the ones who probably deserve it. So, everybody gets it once in a while, but, I have a lot of clients who never have this problem because their customers are already happy. I can guarantee you that M.A. Peterson does not have people doing that online, because I've used them before, and they're also one of my clients. But so I'd leave you with that old school thought. It's kind of gets back to the core principles of customer service.
Okay, so again, we have the room. Stick around if you'd like. Thank you very much, and thanks to our panelists. And look forward to seeing you at the next Club Entrepreneur event. Thank you.